Still trying to herd all those ducks into a nice neat row before you get started with your business or project? Maybe you've already started, but your fear is stopping you from up-leveling. Or maybe you've spent your life saying yes to everyone else, but committing to yourself is still on your to-do list. Hi, I'm Claire Barton, and I'm a recovering perfectionist too. Welcome to the show where I share simple, practical, and mindset tips to get you doing work you're passionate about, making the money you want, and spending your time and energy building your dream lifestyle. Hello, recovering perfectionists. It's Claire here, and I'm joined by the lovely Jenny Cole, who is an executive coach and a consultant and a cheerleader. Welcome, Jenny.
Welcome. Thank you, Claire. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I am super excited to have a chat with you. For anyone listening, we were just having a bit of a chat before we started recording about the sort of foundational stuff around the perfectionist and the perfectionism and what it actually is and how it shows up. And this is your space that you play in and your pure zone of genius. So I can't wait to pick your brains and hear the Jenny Cole version of how perfectionism shows up in life and business and that sort of thing. So before we do that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you and who you work with and why you're in this space, and a bit about your journey with perfection as well.
Well, my name is Jenny Cole, obviously, and I'm actually a recovering principal more than a recovering perfectionist. I was in education for a long time and, long story, burnt out, trying to do too many things at once. And for the past 10 years, I've been running my own businesses, and I coach executive women, and perfectionism fascinates me because I'm not a perfectionist. I don't have a perfectionistic streak in my body, but the women that I work with, high-powered, well-paid business women who are often juggling family and looking after older parents and running, big businesses or high-powered schools, and they were perfectionists. And I was really curious about what was going on, what was, from a coach's point of view, how that was getting in the way of them meeting their goals and living the life that they wanted to lead. So my curiosity is because I'm not a perfectionist, but I work with a lot of them, and so that's kind of how I found myself here.
Oh, it's so interesting. And I've also a little bit similar, that I kind of had ways of, I guess, covering up my perfectionism so that I seemed like I was footloose and fancy free, while I was actually kind of the duck underwater and like doing all the perfectionist things, but also making myself seem like cool, calm and collected on the top of the thing. And obviously, people who were close, friends, family, that sort of thing, could see right through that sort of rubbish.
Yes.
And I remember, I think I probably mentioned it on the show before, I remember when I was in high school, and a friend of mine, my best friend and I, who people would still probably mistake one of us for each other because we were an item for so long, we were doing one of those the like dolly quizzes or something like that, and one of the questions was, what should your best friend be when she grows up? And this friend of mine said, oh, you should be a beauty therapist. And I was so I was insulted. I was like, no, I can do really big things. In hindsight, I would have been an amazing beauty therapist or hairdresser, which I really wanted to be, but I was too proud at the time, and I thought, no, I have to go to university and do all the things. But I was so, she knew that, and when I questioned her, she was like, well, you love making things beautiful and you love making things, putting things in order. And I was like, no, I don't care what people think about me. Like, whatever, it doesn't have to be pretty. I can do whatever I want. But actually, she hit the nail so far on the head. So I totally hear where you're coming from with that. I'm definitely one of those guilty people. So one of your statements when we first started chatting online was, that perfectionism is fear in a fur coat, is it?
Yes.
Talk me through that. I'd love to know what the hell that means.
It was one of those Instagram quotes that I saw some years ago now that absolutely struck me, because it was exactly what I was seeing in my clients who, as I said, clever women, look like they've got their shit together, ducks paddling, and they were just trying to make everything perfect. And what I realised was that they were frightened of something, frightened of letting someone down, frightened of being seen as it's good old imposter syndrome. They were frightened of being caught out, frightened of making a mistake. And so when I saw it, I thought, absolutely, perfectionism is just a fear that we gloss over by making things orderly or making things beautiful or making things right, or just putting ourselves under an awful lot of pressure so that we look beautiful, be it our physical appearance or the work that we do. But underneath there's a frightened little girl in that fur coat.
Oh, I just got goosebumps on my goosebumps. I think it is, I completely agree. When one of my very first podcast episodes was with a woman who was a psychologist and also a psychotherapist, amongst other things, but she talked a lot about fear and perfectionism and lots of different personality typing and that sort of thing, and I was just absolutely intrigued. And we had a very similar conversation that perfectionism, there's lots of different types of perfectionism, and there's true perfectionism, but most of what shows up as perfectionism, especially for women and in this day and age, is actually just fear. It's that, fear of failure or fear of success, fear of looking stupid, fear of people, might think I don't have my shit together and that would be the end of the world because I have to have my shit together. I think there's this cultural thing probably everywhere, but especially for females in Australia when we're mums and we've got businesses, all that sort of thing, is that we have to make everything look effortless. Everything's got to look easy. We have to, have the tidy house and the kids wearing clean clothes and being fed every day. Like, what's that about? We have to have the social lives. We have to have the career or the business or the income. We have to have, be traveling, and we have to have this kind of Instagram life, and we're not allowed to make it look like we're even trying.
Yeah.
And that's the shame, isn't it? Like, it's fine if that's all the things that you want and you're doing them for the right reason, but you can also go, and I'm stuffed this weekend. And I'm going to drink a bottle of wine to myself to celebrate the fact that no one died this week and, all of that sort of thing. But we have to do all these things, but not even, make it look like we're trying.
Yeah, there's so many plates that we're spinning at the same time. And I think we're terrified that we're going to drop one of them and the whole lot will come crashing down. And that's anxiety inducing, that kind of trying to lead a perfect life, which, as you say, there's different types of perfectionism, but that social media perfectionism, that kind of I've got to do everything right, I've got to be the perfect everything, puts an awful lot of pressure on women. And then you add to that women in the kind of demographic that I work with who are midlife, whatever that means, but they're often then looking after elderly parents as well, and they've got to do that right, because those parents they're not going to be one is shoved into an old person's home. They also want their perfect life. So these women are trying to do everything and make it look, as you said, effortless. But the concern I have is those women who in their work attach self-worth to the quality of what they do, and so that everything that they produce has to be 110%, because they've got to feel like they've got to work harder, do better, produce more. And so that's a different kind of perfectionism. That's being that's internal almost, and not that trying to portray an external perfectionism, but that drive to make sure that they do everything absolutely perfectly in case the internal plate stops spinning.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. I had never really thought about it that way. There's the internal and the external thing. And so what are the risks that you see? You've obviously worked with a lot of people in this sort of space. What are the risks if we keep doing this to ourselves? What happens?
Basic anxiety, just being too busy. But I always put perfectionism really closely to procrastination and confidence. So confidence can be taught, but it's essentially turning our thoughts into action. And so if our thoughts are, this has got to be perfect, we will often put things off, or we'll spend an awful lot of time on them, and that gets in the way of other things, which undermines our confidence. So so there's a whole bunch of things that sit side by side. So perfectionists will often not take risks because they won't do something unless they can do it perfectly. They will often put themselves under a great deal of pressure, hence the anxiety, and all of those things aren't good for your well-being. So because I put procrastination and perfection together and with confidence, there's some really good studies that are showing that if you build a woman's confidence, you increase her well-being. So if perfectionism is a problem, then it's probably impacting on her overall life satisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked to a few health professionals, nutritionists, naturopaths, that sort of thing on the show as well. And, even things like adrenal fatigue, because like you said, we're putting 110% in because 100's not good enough, or 99's not good enough. And we have the adrenal fatigue, or we have the nutritional deficits and that sort of thing because of all the hormonal stuff that happens with anxiety, stress. And it's just this like, blah, 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 this crazy kind of whirlwind of craziness that can happen. And it's not necessarily just in an output or a outwardly facing kind of thing. It actually can physically affect your health. And like you said, there's a lot of people who I've spoken to on business and personal stuff around the perfectionism where there's been things like eating disorders or broken down relationships because their perfectionism or whatever has just gotten so, it's kind of taken over their lives. So then it ends up in, relationship breakdowns and or physical health or burnout, and that sort of thing. And I find often conversations that I've had, and it's certainly true for me as well, is that there's a catalyst. Like there was a moment where you kind of get to the point where you're going, oh my gosh, I can't keep doing this to myself. Something's got to give. For me, I've talked about this 1,000 times. For me, it was when my first child was a couple of months old, and he was an incredibly tricky baby, which I'm sure most are. But where I was sitting to cluster feed him between 4 and 7 p.m. every single night at that time of year, the sun came through the window at a certain angle and showed up this thick layer of ever-building dust on the TV cabinet that I could only see at that time of the day from that vantage point, whatever. And every single day I would sit there crying, thinking to myself, I still haven't dusted that bloody TV cabinet. It's been 24 hours since I last said to myself, it's been 20, I still haven't dusted that bloody TV cabinet. And I just was beating myself up about this bloody TV cabinet having dust on it.
Yeah.
Until I finally was like, what the hell, Claire? You've got a baby who's failing to thrive, like all these things, and you're worried about some freaking dust on a TV cabinet when there's millions of people buzzing around desperate to help somehow. Yeah. All I needed to do was say, when someone said, what can I do to help? Say, can you dust my TV cabinet? That's all I needed to do. Or get over it or whatever. Like there were so many things available to me to stop beating myself up, and just having that tiny, thank goodness, little inkling of self-analysis or self-awareness to go, what the hell is this about? This is not okay. You're beating yourself up over a bit of bloody dust. Made me go, okay, we need to make some big changes here, because if that's how it's manifesting, that I'm literally hating myself right now because of dust, what the chips is going on there. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think, it's not just, I'm a perfectionist. It's actually a really serious issue if you let it get to that point. And I totally agree about the procrastination, that often it's like, well, if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. Or if I don't know what the outcome needs to look like, I won't get started. And I think that's a really big shame, because we've got these big, amazing hearts and these big, amazing ideas and projects that would change our lives as well as the world. But we don't have the confidence sometimes to just take the first step because we're not quite sure that all the ducks are in a row.
Yeah. And one of my roles as a coach is a bullshit detector, so I call people out on that. Seriously, you're worrying about dust, and or whatever it is, and because anxiety makes us more black and white, makes us more kind of omni-focused, and we can only see the dust, whatever our version of dust is. And that's absolutely my job as a coach, is to hear those repetitive patterns of thought, hear those bits of self-doubt, and say, really? We're worried about that?
Yeah, right.
And because I'm not a perfectionist, that comes really quickly, because I'm like, seriously? You've got nothing better to worry about?
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So for people who are perhaps listening and going, oh my gosh, that's me, I'm worried about this, that and the other, what are some of the things that people can kind of start doing or stop doing, or Like, what are some of those mechanisms to get over that as far as you're concerned, and how do you kind of work with people to move that stuff so that they can be more productive or more satisfied or more aligned or whatever it is they're looking for?
I'm always loath to give advice, but as you were talking, it just dawned on me that my background is in special needs. So I dealt with kids with really challenging behaviour, and I say to people, all behaviour is learned. And in order to do something different, you've got to learn a different behaviour. So if you try and squash one thing, if you try and squash your perfectionism, it'll just come out as an eating disorder, or it'll just pop up somewhere. It's like that game of whack-a-mole. If you squash it here, it'll pop up somewhere else. So it's really just about teaching yourself, or tiny little things each day, where you might finish 5 minutes earlier, even if the job's not finished, or set yourself a time to do something and do what you can in that time. So we're not trying to fight the perfectionism, we're trying to teach ourselves other ways to do things. And also catching those thoughts in your head that say, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, whatever that little loop is that goes round and round and round, is to catch ourselves and tell ourselves a different story. He'll notice that it's not perfect, or my mum will, think I'm useless if I haven't dusted the TV. And say to yourself, so I haven't, and notice when the world doesn't collapse because you haven't done it, and congratulate yourself for it. So tiny little steps, tiny little things about what's the opposite of what it is, and can I teach myself to do that? And with most goals, getting yourself a little accountability buddy, someone that will hold you accountable for that and cheerlead you on the way, whether that's your best friend or your boss or your coach, whatever it is, finding somebody to notice when you're doing it differently.
Yeah, absolutely love it. I've started writing a book around all of this sort of thing, and so many of the things that you've mentioned, I've talked about exactly the same thing. One of the things is having a bullshit clause. So you've got someone or something or some sort of mechanism that calls you on it when you're either slipping back into some of those things and you're hiding behind perfectionism and wrapping a beautiful big bow on it and all that sort of thing, when actually there's some other shit going on. But also, having someone who can cheer you on and can tell you it's okay, you're stuffed up, don't worry, drink a glass of wine and let's get on with the job, sort of thing. Like, it doesn't fall apart. I presented at Seven Sisters a couple of years ago on this as well, and I kept saying, I was beating myself up afterwards, as you do as a perfectionist, I kept saying, go and make some mistakes, go and look for ways that you can fail that no one's going to notice, leave the dishes until tomorrow morning. When there's no one else in the house, no one else gives a shit. You don't really give a shit. Your kids certainly don't care. Just leave them till tomorrow. Just practice doing that one little thing. I'm not very good at that, but if that's one thing that you can fail at, and then you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, the dishes are still there, but no one died and the house didn't burn down and everything's fine. Okay, cool. Little tiny things like that. And I think of that quote from the movie The Hangover, and he's always like, but did you die? I keep telling myself that. It's kind of like my little thing on the shoulder, that feels so gross. Yuck, I totally stuffed that up. But did you die? No? Okay, cool. Let's move on with our life. So, I really like that. I think there's some really cool things in there. So giving yourself some tiny new little behaviours and sticking to them. I'm a big fan of this sort of thing. I've started working with Suzanne Karlberg. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's a health and weight loss coach. And she talks a lot about breaking down these things. So I start tracking things for my health as well as for my business. I start tracking habits rather than going, right, this month I need to, I don't know, lose 5 kilos and walk for an hour every day and blah, blah, blah. And then I do that for 3 days and then I miss a day and I beat myself up and then I think I'll start next month, right? So now I go, okay, I want to go do 5 minutes of some sort of exercise 12 times this month. And then every time I do it, I get a little gold star. It's not a gold star, a colouring little thing. But making it more broken down into some of the little habits and adding things in rather than saying, right, no more chocolate. I'm not going to say no more chocolate. I'm going to say instead I'll drink more water. So adding things in, which actually tricks you into thinking that, that it's sort of easier and, and all that sort of thing, which actually most of the things that you're adding in mean that your body and your mind don't need the things that you would otherwise have done anyway. So it's kind of this beautiful double-edged, delicious sword, whatever you call it. So, I'm a big fan of that, giving yourself some new little goals and tracking against that as well. Yeah. Awesome. We could talk about this for days and days and
Yeah.
weeks and weeks and weeks, I reckon. But just tell me a little bit more. I just want to explore a little bit the catching the thoughts in your head, because that's a tricky one. And I think there's lots of activities. Some people say wear like a rubber band on your wrist, and every time you catch yourself having a negative thought, change it to the other hand, or flick yourself, or whatever it is. And I did this course with Trish Everett years ago, and she did that same sort of thing. And just walking through the shops, I had to go park my car, walk to Coles to get 2 or 3 things on the way to going to pick up my daughter from kindy. And I was astounded that I had moved this rubber band probably 30 times just going from the car to Coles. And it's probably a 300-metre walk at the most.
Wow.
And I was just doing that was like, oh my gosh. And some of it was negative stuff about other people, like, hurry up. Why are you walking so fast? Why are you wearing those shoes with those socks? Why are you, like, all this ridiculous stuff that I really didn't give a shit about. But it was just, and some of it was about me, and some of it was about, I caught my reflection in the window, or, you know, but it was just such a reality check going, oh my God, things that are actually going through my head. And so then I made myself a little bit of a challenge. Well, if that's the noise that's going on in my head, I have to I was consciously looking for things that I would be complimenting people in my head, or nice things that I was saying. So just like taped over that original tape. Is that one of the things, like, to catch?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We're hardwired to notice negative things because they kept us safe in evolutionary terms. So our brains are Velcro for bad stuff and Teflon for good. So we need to practice overriding that. Yeah. So you're walking through the shops thinking, oh God, she's a cow, blah, 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 blah. And they're kind of automatic negative thoughts. They keep popping up. I'm not a psych, but this is, some of the stuff that I've learned along the way. And so we've got to consciously override those in whatever way is useful. And that's why gratitude practice has a bit of a bad name, but that's what that is. It's looking for things to be grateful for, and rather than things to beat yourself up about. Or if you're a perfectionist and you're all about order and beauty, it's to find order and beauty in other things like nature, which is not ordered in any way. If you think about a rose bush, it's absolutely beautiful, but it's thorny and it's revolting. And to find beauty, find things to be grateful for, and to be really mindful of the chatter that's in your head and overriding it. And that reminds me of what we were talking about earlier. We actually are drawn to people's imperfections. We actually love it when people are imperfect. And we were talking about Cindy Crawford and her mole, just to not only to notice what's in your head, but to realise that the things that make us unique, the things that make us beautiful, are our differences, not how perfect we are. It's really hard to love something that's absolutely perfect. Right. You can admire it. Yeah. But it's hard to love it. Right, because it's so unattainable and almost aspirational, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. We mentioned before we started recording, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people in a lot of different places the last month about this authenticity. So the more that you can do whatever it is that you need to do to get okay with your imperfections and standing in that truth, while still being respectful, obviously, and flexible and all of that sort of thing, but that it does repel the wrong people, which is really hard for perfectionists to get okay with a lot of the time. I use perfectionism in exchange with people pleasing and yes person. And, if I've got even the inkling or the feeling, or my internal brain told me that someone didn't like me, I would try even harder to make them like me. It was like I was hardwired. I couldn't be unliked. I had really, really big troubles with that. But as soon as, I feel like I've done loads of work on that, and it's a work in progress, obviously, but it's so much easier to just go, oh, well, this is who I am, and I'm okay with that, and I'm still open to hearing your opinion or your whatever, but this is where I'm at. And to be okay with the fact that there are people who are going to be repelled by that, and go, graciously in gratitude, with full of gratitude, thanks for being here, but no thank you, sort of thing, that it actually is... It's one of the biggest things I think that's come out for me on a personal side that I've learned through being in business, is that actually the more authentic and the more honest you are with who you are,
better everything is anyway. And it is those imperfections. It is, you know, and I always say it's like, I laugh at my own jokes, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I think I'm freaking hilarious half the time. So I'm going to have a laugh. And if you think that's me being vain or up myself, we're probably not going to have great conversation anyway. Do you know what I mean?
It's very liberating. It's very
so
liberating. Yeah. And I've got to say, some of that comes with age. So if you're a younger perfectionist, it's all right. Hopefully things will get better for you. But yeah, but when you know who you are at your best, when you're authentic, when you know what your values are, what your strengths and skills are, and that's who you are, then you get to be you, which is so liberating. And when you can say to others, look, I'm sure you've got a lot to give, but you're not for me. It just takes so much less effort, mental effort, because you're not trying to be all things to all people.
Impress everyone.
Yeah,
exactly. One thing I saw, Taryn Brumfitt's beautiful movie Embrace several years ago. Went to the, you know, when she was touring around, and got to also hear her speak at the same time. And one thing that I got from that whole experience, the movie, and just hearing her, is that she's like, honestly, we worry so much about what other people think, but we are also worried about what other people think, that no, we're actually not thinking that much about other people. And
exactly.
For the first time, after I saw that, a couple of weeks later, I realized that I was at my big local shopping centre, the big, nice, fancy one where, you know, it's in quite an affluent area, and I would normally not have gone out with, you know, less than makeup and lippy and earrings and some sort of decent looking outfit. And I was there in something that I would have probably struggled to go to my mailbox in previously, because it was like, well, I need to probably put some, you know, at least brush my hair or put some decent clothes on, whatever. But I was walking through the shopping centre, and I felt so uncomfortable. I don't even remember what the reason was, but I felt so uncomfortable being there. I knew that I felt really, was like, people are going to be staring, people are going to be thinking she looks fat, ugly and unkempt and blah, blah, blah. And I was waiting for someone to make eye contact with, to get that approval, that disapproval, to see how much they're like, ooh, what are you wearing? And I did this whole shop and realised no one had even made eye contact with me. No one gave a shit enough to look at me to think, oh, is she wearing tracksuit pants to the shops? Because everyone was so concerned about what they were doing that no one actually cares what you're doing. So just go to the shops in your trackies if you want to.
Yes.
You know what I mean? No one actually cares enough that you should care that they care. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. and on a similar idea, but on a work front, I give lots of presentations. So I make lots of PowerPoints, and there are people who also present at conferences and so forth with me. And I'm really conscious that I've not pulled it together at the last minute, because I know it's in my head, but I've put it together, and there are odd spelling mistakes, and sometimes I don't use slides, and sometimes it's not perfect. And as a non-perfectionist, I think, wow, what a lot of time I saved. And then I'll be chatting to somebody who says, oh, I was revising it at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't sure if this was going to happen. And I think, oh, darling, for you, no one's going to notice. No one is going to think, gosh, she didn't put a full stop at the end of that paragraph. You want to be entertained. They want to know about you, the inside of you, not the pretty slide that you put up behind you.
Yeah.
And the same about you and your trackie. You're just as lovely in your trackie on the inside as you are in something more glamorous.
Exactly. Oh, I've got goosebumps on my goosebumps. I love this conversation so much. All right. Okay, we could, as I said, keep talking about this all day, literally all day, and I'm sure we'll talk about this again. I want to kind of wrap it up, because I feel like there's so much juice in there, and I hope that this is really helpful for people who are listening and that sort of thing. What would you say is like the number one piece of advice? We've talked through lots of things, but what's the number one thing that you would say really resonates with most of the people who you talk with, who maybe it kind of gives them that first little nudge to go, okay, I can do this. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can move on and the world won't implode. That's one little nugget.
Oh, yeah.
No pressure, but what's that?
No pressure. Get out of your own way. Get out of your own way. I guess the one thing that I haven't said is that perfectionism naturally builds failure, because you'll never be perfect.
Right.
So it'll always fail. And so when people see it like that, I say, do you want to fail every day? They'll say no. I say, well, lower the bar so that we can hit success, which is your version of colouring in your little things towards your habit tracking. Give yourself an opportunity to succeed. Notice when you've succeeded and congratulate yourself. Not notice when you've got it perfect and when you haven't got it perfect and criticize yourself. So notice the small things. Notice when you've done something. Notice when you're not when you're not getting in your own way.
Yeah, love it. I remember when I first started talking about this, there was something that really struck me, and it was something like your 50% is someone else's 100% or something to that effect.
Correct.
God, it's so true. Because if you're working in your zone of genius, you don't have to do it 110% all the time. You're still helpful and still, you can still do it at 50% and still be super helpful and super amazing and aspirational to people around you as well. So
yes, because you've got strengths and a skill set that are different to everybody else's. So you're naturally going to be different and better. So, and to embrace that. And that's where the confidence bit comes in. So just do it. Just do one tiny thing. Send one email, push save on one document. And just that's enough wins. And celebrate.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of celebrating. Thank you so much, Jenny. It's been absolutely awesome having a chat. I can't wait to release this into the world because I feel like it's super helpful and there's lots of beautiful little tidbits in there that people can hopefully grab and make a few changes and move on without worrying about if the dishes are done or you're wearing your trackers to the shops.
It's been my pleasure, Claire. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. And all of your links will be in show notes so people can go and lovingly stalk you and find you and all of your beautiful things. We'll speak to you soon again, I'm sure.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Jenny.